Rob,
Brother Jamal.
what's going on, soldier?
Hey, salute.
Yep, here we go one more again.
hmm
Everybody out there, welcome to the Level Up Past Corporate Trauma Podcast. I'm Brother Jamal, author and primary success coach for Carbonado Coaching and author of Corporate Trauma. That's my man right there, Mr. Robert Felder, CEO of Felder Works. And we are back at you this week with another podcast. Yo, Rob, last week's podcast was pretty dope. Got some great feedback. How you feeling?
Listen, I feel very, very good to kick it off the way we did. Got really, really good feedback. And for many people, it was a breath of fresh air. For others, it was something that they didn't know they needed. So with that, I'm just like, oh, I couldn't wait for today.
Yeah. So that's a shout out to the Level Up and Corporate Trauma community out there. Shout out to Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And then all of those that are chiming in via shared pages. When you get on the podcast, make sure you hit us with some feedback, some engagement, some thumbs up, some hearts. Even if you disagree, we don't mind disagreements. Throw that in the chat. We'll definitely address it. And if we don't, put it in there again to make sure that we do. So this week, we want to dive right in. Rob, something that everybody hears me talk about a lot, especially in my corporate trauma word of the day, is something that I refer to as the corporate industrial complex. Now, I know that may not necessarily be familiar language and lingo to everybody, but it is integral to the corporate trauma concept, right? So the corporate industrial complex, simply put and to be defined, is a group of businesses and industries that make up a collection of experiences that professionals go through. It starts with the education system, in particularly higher education, and then from there, the usual I guess would say footprint is to go into maybe for-profit work, right? Working for an organization whose primary idea is to make money. And then a lot of people who get tired of for-profit or go into for-profit and realize it's not for them, they end up back in nonprofit. They end up going to nonprofit, right, Rob? This is a trajectory that we've seen a lot. And the interesting thing is, with this concept, the corporate industrial complex, with it is not exclusive to these three pockets for education, higher education, for-profit, and nonprofit, but this is the foundation. And coincidentally, the highest group, or one of the highest groups of nonprofit businesses, are universities, colleges, and institutions of higher learning, right? But the interesting thing that I assert with respect to the corporate industrial complex is that all three of these places, these circles, this trajectory, they're all the same place.
Oh Lord, here
That's
we
that
go.
look.
Here we go.
That's that look,
Pretty
right?
much gonna turn
So
the
this
lights
is
off soon.
right. So this is one of those. This is one of those things that that based on what I've seen, what I've heard, what I've helped people, and I've coached people to. This is one of those things I cooked up that make you want to go. So, but back at it, right? So when you think about, we get conditioned even in our secondary and primary education to get our education in exchange for knowledge that we can sell back to the marketplace for money, right? Which points us directly into for-profit in the most, in most cases, right? Especially if you go to college or if you seek education after high school, for example, right? But the conditioning, right? What happens in school if you don't do well, right? You get kicked out. What happens if you go to work and you get a job and you don't perform well in your job? You get fired. Same thing in nonprofit. If you don't perform well, you get fired. And the question comes up to my head, right? Like, why, even as early as 6, 7, 8 years old, why is the pressure put on the student to be educated more than the educator. You see what I'm saying? And then when I started to think about, yo, they are getting us ready to, like I said last week, to run into the buzzsaw and fall into the meat grinder, which is how corporate trauma starts. It starts with that fear. So if the pressure is put on me as a student to be educated more than it is the teacher, then by the time I get of working age, that same trauma-informed experience, that same fear factor exists. And now when I am working through my arenas of trauma and fear, which starts the trajectory of corporate trauma, then I am even more controllable. And then a lot of professionals don't see or forget their greatness or what they started and wanted to be educated to do. All those ambitions, all those images of grandeur becomes delusions of grandeur, right? You know, I got to get in here and I got to get this paycheck. So I'm asserting, and I'm gonna let you take this, that they're all the same place. They're just separated by time, age, and your tenure. They even coincide with one another and they feed one another. And they're supported by other aspects of our professional society, like civil service, law enforcement, politicians. You know, all of that stuff is in there. But the basis is the conditioning that we get coming out of our education to go right into another form. We're being trained, we're not being educated to go into a workforce, right, that informs our experience based on the same pros and cons, rewards and consequences that we have been conditioned and used to, even as small as 6, 7, 8 years old. Tell me what you think. Am I off base? Corporate industrial complex.
Nah, you know, the thing that jumps out to me, brother Jamal, is the idea that you're being trained from an early age on what success is, right? What's acceptable, what's not acceptable, but it doesn't have a lot to do with the individual. And that's the piece that I'm always going to gravitate towards. You're jumping into the fire at an early age, and they're more or less training you on how to last as long as you can through the meat grinder. And I know for many people, they'll hear that, I'm like, oh, you guys are making this too big of a deal.
Yeah, it's a stretch.
Right. But talk to the people who they did all these years, regardless if it's corporate, regardless if it's white collar, blue collar. And at some point in time, it dawns on them that I got the short end of the stick. Yeah, maybe I was able to provide for my family, but at what cost? And when you start to realize that a lot of things that you do is based on where you started.
Right.
And a lot of times we think about where we started as just our family. But I always push on folks, when we think about starting in education, our educational career is starting as early as pre-K 3. And for many, you can be in a school district for more than 12 years if you start that early. And when Jamal says it can't just be on the person who's being educated, but also be on the educator, then we got to kind of look at that and say, well, what responsibility do those who are pouring the glass have to those who are looking for something to drink? Right. And I hope that people can understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The idea that, hey, the person who's looking for something to drink, well, you know, you don't have water at home or you don't have a cup. So what I give you should be enough. And it's like, I get that, but there has to be some type of accountability. There has to be some idea of, hey, hopefully what you're offering not only prepares someone to be an employee, but also prepares them to be a leader. And that can start as early as pre-K 3, pre-K 4, pre-K 5 with the expectations that we have for our kids. So I'll just touch on that piece from that component.
No, you bring up a great point, right? Because my wife is an educator, and my son, I was debriefing with him one day, and I was like, "How'd you do on your test?" He was like, "Man, it was a retake, I got an 85 on the first time. I wanted to get an A, but I got like an 83 because the question that I thought I got wrong the first time that I answered differently. I was like, so what happened? You got it right the first time. How'd you get it wrong the second time? He was like, because the way they asked me the question was the correct answer was it was a multiple choice question and it had two correct answers. But one answer was more scientific in its explanation. Therefore, it was the more correct answer. But at the end of the day, they both said the same thing. I said to my wife, I said, why would the test put you in a position where you had to choose between which vernacular you wanted to use to answer the accurate question? And then it brought me, oh, snap. That's exactly what I go through or I have gone through as a professional, because even though my end result was effective, was the right one, because I didn't say it in the terms that the test giver was requiring for the correct answer, my answer was wrong. And I was like, it's proof. For example, like, who's the head of a college? The president. Who's the head of a for-profit organization? CEO or president. Same thing, nonprofit. And then you go down to your VPs, and in a school, it's the provosts or the vice presidents. And if you look at the hierarchy, the pay scales, the pay range, right? It is the exact same. And the students and or frontline workers in a for-profit or nonprofit organization are the same, right? The institution, whether either one of the three that we're talking about, cannot exist without those that are on the front line, the associates, right? The students cannot exist. Everybody above the frontline people are expendable. However, you would think the way that we're conditioned that it is the associates and what you produce on the front line is the expendable thing. And that's not necessarily something that I wanted to subscribe to. So when I was coming up with corporate trauma, I was like, how do I reach people and help them understand that everything that you've been taught up until this point that's got you feeling the way that you are feeling in the midst of your corporate trauma started long time ago, right? And so this is why the corporate industrial complex concept, the way that I put it together, is the reason why I did it, in order to give people a chance to slow down, step back, and to your point, to see where it all started. What you think?
Yeah, that hits so close to home, because even when we think about it, being right isn't as important as someone's preference. That's what I got from you, right? Are you giving it to me the way that I want it is what's most important. And you learn that at a young age, right? How they like, there's so much in that when you realize it's sort of like someone said to me before, like, I felt like I'm crushing these KPIs and they asked me all these questions. And then I got hit with that's just expected. But I was like, many of the things that I did wasn't even a part of the KPIs. But that's what a good manager would do. And I'm like, well, then why wasn't it right? Then why wasn't it a part of the KPIs, or why wasn't it a part of the expectations, so that I could know what above and beyond means? And for me, it's always one of those situations that regardless of where I am, let me know what good and great looks like, so I can figure out how to get there and surpass it. Not I'm out here shooting, taking my shot, and then I could have went 8 of 10, and then it's like, well, you know what, you really needed to go 10 for 10. And I'm like, well, all right, cool. Next time, just let me know. And I think a lot of things with just life in general, and when we talk about interacting in the world, it's always this aha, I got your moment.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I got you. It's one of those times when you're just looking and it's like, but it can't be that serious. And a lot of times I think that those I got you moments aren't about having someone learn,
Mm.
right? But it's more or less about someone else's ego and about someone else being successful, not the person that's supposed to learn. That's my issue.
And at the end of the day, Rob, I take a page out of your book. I heard you say one time, there's a reason why the for the sake of this conversation, the corporate industrial complex does not apply the practice of apprenticeship anymore, right?
Mm,
There's a reason for that.
yeah.
The education of what you learn about yourself, or just going out experimenting in the practical application of those experiments, is for the professional to figure out, what is it in me that resonates with this thing on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And once I'm exposed to that and I make my choice and I start my journey and then I become a professional or I enter the workforce, really everything else is on the job training. That's why so many people are like working in fields of endeavor that they did not major in college, because they found a place that they liked, that resonated with them, and was able to learn the flow because of their spectrum of and capacity to learn and apply intelligence and on the job training. You know what I'm saying? I got a degree. I got a business degree with a concentration in marketing. Like, all right. And I had the presence of mind. Let me choose that because it's broad enough for me to do something until I figure out what I really want to do. Because somebody told me everything, once you get your foot in the door, everything's OJC anyway. I mean, OJT anyway, on the job training. But there's merit and value to your point that I've heard you talk about before, of the practice of master and apprentice.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? We go Star Wars on them.
Yeah. And the craziest thing about it, the apprenticeship made more sense because everything was very, very focused.
Yep.
Right.
No time.
If you wanted to learn from someone, then that means the things that person did were did to get you closer to what you wanted to be a master of.
Correct.
Now we jump through hoops to get a certain amount of credits or to get a certain amount of accolades. And a lot of those things do not help us with the goal that we're looking to accomplish. And it's like the strangest thing. And it's like, man, am I just here to help put other people's kids through college, or am I here to get a degree? Like, I'm lost. When you sit there and it's like, man,
what am I doing?
Right? I got to learn about everybody else's civilization except my own. Right? I have to learn about these groups of people. I have to learn about this. And ultimately, if you tell me, yes, it makes you well grounded, and I understand that piece. Yep. But if you find out that a lot of times the reason that folks end up falling out or dropping out of college, or why the retention rates are low, are because of all of the complementary classes to their major, then at some point in time, folks got to take a step back and say, are we doing the true customer service? And when I say I'm not saying customer service. I'm talking about, are we truly servicing the true customer, which is really the student? And I had that conversation with someone today about that. And it's like, hey, at all points in time, you have to identify who's the real customer, right, and who's supposed to be the center of the universe,
right,
for that profession.
Right.
Right. Because once you get there, then you can do a whole lot of other things. And it's not going to be about, hey, the person who gave the money, or this stakeholder, or just this investor. It comes to a point where you're the best business because the person who you put first is the person who's spending the time and the person who's getting the money, as well as the person who's actually executing on creating these things, which are usually the employees. I'll leave it there.
Yeah. We're going to get out of the way of that conversation so we can bring out, we got a special guest. But one last point, right? You go 12 years of school, you graduate high school, you go to college. and then they give you a college entrance exam. I'm paying the college to give me a college entrance exam in lieu of my high school diploma to graduate 4 years later, in most cases, right? In some cases, to interview for a job for them to pay me, and I don't get tested on the way in other than my interview, right? The corporate industrial complex is a very complicated place, right? And in respect to that, we have a special guest this evening that I would like to introduce. It's a major contributor, entrepreneur, author, financial advisor, and fellow fan on social media. I'm a fan of both of these gentlemen right here, Mr. Rahkim Sabree, as well as my man Robert Felder. And I just want to read some words because I think his own words is best to introduce him to our audience. So
that is true. That is very true.
Pardon me while I channel my inner Rahkim. All right. I'll be honest. For a while, I was afraid of sharing this tweet after quitting my job. I thought to myself, what an irreparable damage the sharing of this thought on this platform could do to my brand, my credibility, to future hiring opportunities. The truth, however, is that we all know the truth, and many of us are afraid to expose it. The need to fall in line, to be silent, to observe rituals, lest we be made an example of. This is an issue that needs discussing through. Why does corporate culture rely on a Stockholm syndrome to be kept to keep an engaged employee base? Why don't we see the value of empowering employees, those with both intrapreneurial and entrepreneurial aspirations, to be their best selves professionally, personally, and financially? Why is the desire to develop and create and exist as an identity separate from the whole met with aggression, spite, and condescension? I'm interested in your thoughts in the post that he's referring to in that post, as if that wasn't enough, goes like this. Corporate America's toxic trait is guilting you for wanting more for yourself while simultaneously gaslighting you into thinking your skills, talents, and experiences are worth less than you deserve. Rahkim, man, I want to welcome you to the Level Up to Corporate Trauma podcast, and to all our guests out there. His latest contribution to the culture is his ebook, right? I Fired My Boss: Escaping Corporate Trauma. So Rahkim, welcome, sir. Welcome.
Thank you. That was definitely a mouthful.
Yeah. Welcome to the stage. It came from you.
Hey, right.
Look, he got a drink after. He got a drink as if he just read it.
I got a drink.
See? That's
so
all
what's
you.
Up, man? How did you escape corporate trauma? Tell us.
Yeah, I just did it. Right?
Hold on. That's room for our new meme.
For sure. I think, a lot of times we overcomplicate decisions, especially decisions that are the best decision for us. And so a lot of, what you talked about ahead of this really kind of resonated with me, made a lot of sense, because so I shared a tweet after I quit my job on Twitter, and I said, I quit my job and let everybody know. And that tweet went viral. I think at this, as it stands, it's at 2.3 million impressions. And following that tweet, I talked about how I was afraid, I was nervous. I talked about how I did everything right. And so as you were talking about the experience that starts in school and that idea of doing everything right, I was somebody who was on the honor roll from the kindergarten all the way up through high school. I never got detention. I never got held back. I never got expelled or suspended. So, I guess the question is, how do you define right? How do you define what is the standard of behavior? And then when you go into a corporate environment or, any working environment, that same structure exists, right? You're chasing merit based on what is this defined behavior What does engagement look like? What does your bonus structure and your raise structure look like? What are the boxes that you have to check off in order to make a living and progress in that space? And it was a game that I played for 10 years. This year made a decade for me. I started working in banking at 21 years old. I turned 31 May 15th. I quit my job May 28th. And, just as I get to decompress and kind of reflect on what that journey has looked like and what I want the future of my journey to look like, a big part of that is rediscovery of self, like figuring out, okay, who does Rahkim want to be and who is Rahkim separate from this identity that was established in that space. And so I tell people, I grew up in corporate America. Like I said, I started at 21, and that's a very impressionable age. And all of my 20s really being defined by the standard of what is professional. How do you show up? What do you wear? What do you not wear? How do you talk? Who do you hang out with? What do you say? And so analyzing, how I talk, what words I use, the fact that I think, intently of the words that I use before I use them so as not to offend, the diplomacy that I've developed, and what has been characterized in a corporate environment as communicating effectively. It's communicating effectively because I'm not hurting anybody's feelings, right? Or leading, or rather influencing without authority. And how do you influence by not being threatening? And so all of these things that, I was at one time very proud of, and in some respects still am very proud of the skills that I've cultivated, but understanding who those skills were cultivated for, like whose benefit those skills were cultivated for, and who was really kind of winning at the end of all of that. So to answer your question, again, I would say, you just do it. I got to a point where I think maybe the downward spiral started sometime in February of this year, when I was just like, man, I'm not happy. I'm not fulfilled. I'm showing up to work angry. I'm showing up to work anxious. And as time progressed from, that point in February up until the 2 weeks leading up to my decision, I was just in this kind of state of limbo where I said, why, it would be irresponsible for me to leave. I was certainly applying for different positions. What am I going to do about paying my mortgage? How am I going to make a living? How are my parents going to feel? That was a really big concern and decision. Like, how are my parents going to feel? Am I going to be viewed as, at one point in time, the golden child, and now, the person who threw it all away? What kind of support am I going to have in making that decision? So there was a lot of internal factors there, and certainly it was not a uninformed decision. There was definitely some planning involved and a lot of counsel. But ultimately, I had to make what was the best decision for me, my mental health, my spiritual health, if I'm going to be very honest. And it just came down to doing it.
Hey, wow. It sounds complicated, but like my peoples, and I don't mind shouting them out, Rob, because of how they treated my man Kaepernick. Like Nike said, just do it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. You know the interesting thing about just listening to you as you share it and as you articulate what you experience so well. At the end, you brung up your spirituality, your family, so your parents, and then and financial, right? But the first two, they're so large in our life, right? Regardless of what we believe, where we're from, but what you were experiencing and where you were in the world and what we've been taught still made you question if those things were worth sacrificing.
100%.
Right? That's the piece from everything that I got. And then once you got to the back end of your Emmy speech, right? When folks go on and they're like, listen, this is who I'm going to thank everybody. And you said, listen, I was battered and and let's be clear. It doesn't have to be so much about the company compared to, like Jamal talked about in podcast 1, But when you put all these groups of people together, they create a culture in a place. And within the work world, the individual, either you're in that culture, right? Or you getting eaten by that culture.
100%.
Right. And as individuals of color, we even have to do, and I heard you say it, but you didn't use the phrase that many of us was taught, and you code switch. Right. It was like, okay, I gotta to be able to make folks feel comfortable, to be able to interact, to be able to fit in. Like I gotta change up maybe how I move, how I speak, how much I use my hands, whatever the case may be. But I hope that folks catch that piece before I ask you this next question. When you have to question if your soul, and I'm going the extreme, I guess, if your soul is worth being damaged for this check, right? If if you would just rather be upset, you know, have heart problems like your health, right? When you have to question, like, man, you know, I know all these things are at risk, but I got to get these coins.
Right.
I'm always saying to folks at some point in time, you have to recognize that you are the most important business in the contract negotiation or the contract that you signed.
For sure.
And it's so often that we get out here and we're negotiating for both. We're negotiating for them and we're negotiating for us. And a lot of times we negotiate better for them than we do for ourselves.
That's a fact.
So that leads me to this question. This was like, ooh, this dude is nuts, man. This dude is
y'all,
crazy.
And Rahkim, this is what you said, family.
I mean, I stand by what I put out.
Listen. If nothing else, bro, like you bring some provocative stuff to the workplace. And when I say workplace, I'm talking about the space that you call home for what you deliver.
Yeah.
Right.
Facts.
And when I saw this title, this quote, I said, man, this dude crazy. Man, and people who know me know I'm crazy. Like I'm live. Once I get going and I get on and they say we live, I'm liable to call your mama out. Man, I say your dead folks. Like I'll take it way back. And they be like, yo, Rob, man, you can't let that dude come outside.
Yeah, chill.
So you gotta tell me.
Yeah.
Look, I gotta close my eyes. Look, you barely can see me. My doggone light won't get brighter. I gotta close my eyes. What did you mean by corporate buck breaking?
Oh my God! Hold on before you answer.
Where are we, and what are we talking about for the folks in the back, for the folks in the front? Yeah. For the folks who are highly melanated and those who are trying to figure out if they could get some.
Right.
What are we talking about? Like, where we at? If I don't get nothing else out of you, what did you mean by corporate butt breaking, my brother?
Yeah. So I guess we should start at whether or not I need to describe.
He got to give me a precursor. He like, listen.
I just want to know if the audience is primed and understanding of what
let them look it up. Let them look it up. Look, better yet, let them look it up.
I'll let them look it up.
Now, unless y'all want to go real deep, and we're gonna go real deep, and you're gonna break the whole thing down. But folks at least got to go and look up the term corporate. Look up the term buck breaking.
Yeah, because Rahkim created corporate buck breaking.
Yeah.
That's a Rahkim original. That's a Rahkim original.
Yeah.
So what do we have? What do we have?
It's really just being made an example of. Right. It's being made an example of while also being humiliated to say, this is what he did to get out of line. This is what happens to people who get out of line. And, that looks different depending on who's doing it, right? But it's usually on public display. It's usually discussed kind of like in the break rooms and in between meetings. It's just like, oh shoot, like I don't want to do that. And so you made a comment, and I just want to go back to it because I want to be clear too. There was no questioning my spirituality or my family or myself in that situation. Ultimately, when the question came up, I made the decision very quickly. But I do want to share a story. I was struggling with just the existence in the space, and I was asking for advice from a colleague. And there were several different angles that I was going to take, and all of those angles was shot down by this colleague. And the colleague said to me, there's no winning this for you. And so I was like, well, what are you advising me? And their answer was, say yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, and do what you got to do until you find an opportunity to get out. And my immediate response to that was, that's not in my blood. I just said that. I didn't think about it. That's not in my blood. And it was at that moment that I knew what the decision was. But then I go to my father, who also is very provocative. And I explained to him the situation. And as I'm explaining to him the situation, I felt like this wind hit me in the center of my chest. And I started crying.
Yeah.
And it felt like it was just echoed throughout generations of trauma, that I was like,
yes,
I was resonating with a past that is not so distant, right? And saying like, nah, like we're not going to lay down and we're not going to let this happen.
that's right.
This is the choice that you have to make. This is the crossroads. And so I share that in transparency and authenticity, because that spiritual component that we're talking about, that was the confirmation that I needed to know that I made the right decision, that I was making the right decision, I was walking down the right path, however difficult that was going to look, or however prepared or unprepared I was. I've been asked this question a million times since I've left my job. How do you get financially prepared to quit your job? Or how do you get financially comfortable is the question. And I said, there's no comfort in this. There's no comfort in this. I've not been comfortable financially at all since making that decision. If you asked me, 30 days prior or a year prior or 5 years prior, how much money did I think I would need in order to make a decision like this? It would have been much larger than what I had. And I said all that to say that, the money is a tool, right? I talk about money all the time. I talk about financial empowerment, not financial literacy, but financial empowerment. And what I experienced was, stepping into that empowerment, right? To say, I understand what money is. I understand how to use money. I understand what command of money I have at present. And I understand that money is not going to be my slave master. And so if I have to downgrade my lifestyle for a little while to do the things that give me passion and allow for me to spread my wings, then so be it. And in making that decision, I'm also going to talk about it loudly. And so when sharing my tweet and, having that go viral, I was approached by several large media publications. And so I wrote an article for The Griot about it. I wrote an article for Business Insider about it. I wrote an article for Entrepreneur about it. And, really talking about my experience, and what I found is that it resonated with so many people, because there's a lot of people who are experiencing what I was experiencing, but don't have the ability at present to choose them over their salary or whatever other obligations they have.
Facts. And I love what you said. That's when I knew.
Thanks for clarifying that too.
It reminds me of that TikTok thing. That's when they knew they messed up. Man, man, we just don't have enough time. What you just said, really puts in perspective for me, and I have similar stories, but for our audience and all those that will be checking this out, it doesn't work without us. And if we can't do it, then it can't be done. Period. Right. And if we can't get out from up under what doing it makes us feel and what it turns us into, then we should go find something else to do. So I truly respect you for that. But I want
That's
to
a
give
perfect.
you, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and that's a perfect point though, right? And that so this will tie into what we talked about last week. And I asked you, Jamal, I said, what do you think about all these everybody on TV talking about why they can't find people, right? They can't find employees, they can't find team members, they can't hire people. There's so many open jobs.
Right.
And folks kept yelling, they're like, oh, well, it's the extra $300. And that may be a part of it. But what if folks finally got out because of COVID and was able to smell the flowers? And they recognize, yo, y'all can't break me no more. Or I'm not gonna allow you to break me. I was close. And if it wasn't for COVID, I may have never been able to get out. And it's when I listen to CNBC and I listen to all of the business channels, and they'll have folks come in from different companies, and it'll be like, oh, people are starting to go back to work because they got rid of unemployment or they got rid of this, but we still haven't gotten enough. There's a bunch of folks out there who probably before May 28th, because of COVID, they probably got there a little bit faster than Rahkim or earlier than Rahkim because of COVID. Right. But because of the same reasons that Rahkim said, yo, I'm done. Like I have talked to the ancestors. They have sent down what was meant to be sent down. It's come across. I've talked to my dad. Yeah. My mama called me, like the whole entire thing. But nobody wants to talk about that because the workplace is where you go to get your ass kicked and you just got to deal with it. For some, I'm not saying everyone, right, but for some, you step in that place and you like, man, I'm a part of myself is dying.
Yes.
I'm sacrificing something here.
Every day.
You know, and that's why, yeah, I appreciate you for clarifying what I said, right? Yep. And then the second piece is by doing that, it opens up this other side. Hopefully that people will recognize the reason that people aren't taking some of these roles that you have open. One, you're not paying enough. That's going to be one. For the stress that I'm going to have to live through, you ain't paying enough.
They are writing these job descriptions like people can't read, man. Like that's 4 jobs in one, fam. For how much?
Yep.
And then you get me to the interview and it's like, yeah, this is what we no, that's not what we're doing.
It's not.
It's not what we're doing. And we don't have to do that. And if I do, then you got to give me something back. If you can't give me some money, you got to give me some time. You know what I mean? You got to give me, you got tuition reimbursement, something, right? So, man, Rob, your point is so poignant because, you know, it's not just me and you talking about this. Now we got Rahkim. He's on the back of the wagon. You know what I'm saying? And it just has to pick up one individual at a time. And Rahkim, man, I want to give you the final word. I got one last question for you before we land this plane. And just to give you, man, number one, anytime you want to come on to promote something, to do something, to say something, our platform is yours. We truly appreciate you being forward thinking enough to use the corporate trauma phraseology in your literature, because that's what this is all about. But the last question we want to ask, right, is what advice would you give any professionals trying to find their lane in 2021? What advice would you give?
Invest in your personal brand. That is really one of the cornerstones, if you will, to my confidence in being able to leave. And when I made that tweet that you read at the beginning, and talking about the gaslighting that corporate culture does, it was based off of my experience. I was having a really bad day and I was being questioned about the very thing that I'm advising, right? My investment in my personal brand. Why are you doing these things? What is your commitment to the company? What is the reason that you want to do this or that you had done this all on my own time? And by that point in time, I had already, wrote 2 books, delivered a TED Talk, I was featured at Black Enterprise. I writing for Entrepreneur. So my name was circulating, and I was trying to keep it under wraps because I didn't want to be questioned about it. And so when you talk about trauma, you talk about the gaslighting, you talk about the fear. Like I was not spreading my wings because I was worried about who I was going to intimidate or how it was going to be perceived as.
Give it to us again. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Slow that piece one more time.
him down,
You have
Rob.
to. I'm not gonna let you fly all the way through it. I just want you to start that one piece one more time. Right? I just want you to start that one last piece for where you were right there. Just start that one more time so the folks don't miss it. I want to make sure they catch that.
Right. For the people
where I said who I was going to intimidate.
Mm-hmm.
I lost my flow.
My bad.
But it's all good, because I'll catch it back. It was the knowing that I was doing things that people who had higher titles than me did not accomplish, and that I was being questioned about, my intentions to the company. There was not. I don't feel like I was met with the excitement that was being spoken or written to say, "Oh, I'm excited about you doing this for you." It was, how does this stack up against what you're doing for us? Yeah. And that's why I use the word intimidate, because, when I think about what my trajectory could have looked like if I was embraced, if, the personal brand building was embraced and leveraged, and how that would have been a mutually beneficial arrangement for the organization and I. There was certainly fear involved, and it wasn't the first time that I had experienced it. I was able to grow as fast as I was across the different organizations that I work for because I had a sponsor. Until I didn't. Once the sponsor realized that I was outpacing what their prescribed growth pattern looked like, then there was attempts to sabotage and shut me down. And so that's why I pivoted to personal brand building. And so we talk about, going back to the beginning, who is Rahkim Sabree, and who does Rahkim want to be outside of this corporate identity? Well, that's what I mean. Being able to move seamlessly between organizations and carry with me not the accomplishments of what I've done for a corporation, but the accomplishments of what I've done for me, right? And so that's the biggest piece of advice. And however that looks, whether you start a podcast or you write a book or you write for publications, however, getting yourself out there and establishing a brand around what is your thought leadership, what is your expertise, what is your passion, so that people can look at you and look you up. I started using a new term. I use a bunch of new terms, but the term is Googleable, right? If somebody types my name into Google, they're not going to see the companies that I worked for. They're going to see the things that I've accomplished for me. And that makes me a more attractive candidate for any organization, but it makes me a more attractive candidate, period, for me, right? So now I get to command the attention of, and so job interviews look different. Job interviews will look different in the future, where it's not an audition where I'm saying, hey, pick me because I did this thing. It's an audition to say, how do you fit into what my game plan looks like? And when I talk about empowerment, that's what I mean.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
Rahkim, wonderful. I mean, he sounded like he been, he worked for the feds and been listening to our conversation.
For a fact. For a fact.
I've really enjoyed it. And I know by the light bulbs and balls of sweat on Rob's forehead that he has enjoyed this as well. We're going to land this plane. You're welcome to stay with us while we land this plane and close out so that we can give ourselves and our audience their time back, Rahkim. But I sincerely appreciate you and what you are presenting to the market. And you have an open invitation to come back and say anything. Our platform, and I know I speak for my man Rob, is your platform, man. Appreciate you and thank you for being our very first guest on the Level Up Past Corporate Trauma Podcast. Everybody,
Nice.
throw your engagement, throw your likes, throw your hearts, throw your whatever thumbs up in the chat for our brother Rahkim Sabree. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yo, Rob, that goes to show, like what he said. If what you're doing don't come from a very real place, people not gonna see you.
That's a fact.
And if you don't have a presence in social media out there or in cyber, I don't care if you work, if you got a day job, if you don't have your own website, then how credible are you to the opportunities, right? How credible are you without a social media presence going forward? Because to your point, Rob, COVID has freed a lot of people to bring their skill sets to the marketplace while being able to smell them roses, all at the same time, man.
Well, Mo, this is where we tie the front to the back.
Yep.
If you've been trained to believe that those who are the leaders know what's best for you your entire life, the day that no longer makes sense to you, it's going to rock you to the core.
Corporate trauma.
Right? When folks tell you that you're not bigger than the company, and I get it, no one person. But if they also tell you that you can't build something of your own that can be big, that's also an issue. The thing that I will always tell folks, that I want everybody to always remember, when Michael Jordan was with the Bulls, even though they felt that the head coach, even though he felt Phil Jackson was the best coach for him and for the team, the organization said, but we don't want Phil. And ultimately, if you want to rock with Phil, then you can go too. We're talking about the greatest player to ever play, arguably top 2 player to ever play, right? He's top 1 for me.
Facts.
But he was sacrificed because the company and the folks whose money it is are like, listen, we own this. You're Michael Jordan on the court, but we are the Chicago Bulls at all time.
That's right.
And I think for everybody, you have to be mindful. Companies do what works for them.
Right.
Even if it causes an issue long term, they've never been the same. Right. But they're like, listen, this is our team. This is our company.
Right.
If we don't want,
even though it's not.
Yeah. Even if we don't want Phil, we don't want Phil.
Right.
And if you want to be down with Phil, then we don't want you either. I was about to quote Tupac, but I ain't gonna do that today. But like that's the thing when hearing Rahkim, and there was something that was there that was real subtle that I just want to bring to the forefront. And man, I probably should ask this question when he was here, but I'm gonna go off of what I heard.
Yep.
You're doing that. But what are you doing on that level for the company?
They can't even fathom, Rob, that he was able to kick butt and do something for himself. So that means that based on that reaction, those two things couldn't occupy the same place at the same time. I'm the same professional, same skill set, but I'm only allowed to produce results for the people that's signing and distributing my paycheck. Unbelievable.
If he would have put his organization's name on it, if he would have been able to get the green light, then if he would have got the same recognition, then he probably would have been okay. But the question was, are you doing something at this level for us? If the homies can't get none, then you can't get none.
And the thing that baffles me, that there's smart people that are in position, that are running these organizations, that are seeing people like Rahkim make moves like that. And it baffles me because if they were able to tap into that side of a person like Rahkim, embrace it, it's a total game changer and win-win. But they would rather sacrifice that in order to not allow the prisoners to run the asylum.
Well, I think the biggest thing, like that's so crazy, but when
The
you really
inmates
think
would
about
not run the asylum.
when you and just to use this basketball analogy just one more time, it is not a priority for the companies to say, "Hey, LeBron, I want you to be the ambassador, right? I want you to be the biggest, the best superstar there is for yourself." The thing that sometimes we forget and that we do wrong, companies are trying to figure out how does what you do help them.
Right.
And when we go into the workplace, we're always trying to figure out how do we help the company.
Right.
And it's not often enough that people take a step back and just say, hey, how do I position myself well enough? How do I connect myself well enough to make sure that I'm getting closer to my goals and goals that I set for myself, not just the corporate ladder that I can climb, but also my life ladder?
Right.
Because your job and your career is a part of that. It supports it in some form of fashion,
Right.
but just being mindful is that do you know what you're sacrificing for some of those things that you move up on the corporate ladder? And I always ask people, just please, I just want you to be mindful. Just know what you're sacrificing.
Absolutely.
What are you putting at risk? And I'll leave it there, Jamal.
Yeah, no, that's a great point to leave it at because and any organization's competitive advantage is an expert professional staff. Don't let anyone try to explain that otherwise. You may be stifled, you may be sabotaged, but it don't change the fact that the better the staff is, right? The more free and creative and expert the staff is, the better, the larger, the broader the competitive advantage for anybody. Look, there you have it, folks. It's in the books. All right, yeah, Level Up Past Corporate Trauma podcast for this week, July 22nd, Thursday night, 7 p.m. Eastern. Man, we thank everybody for joining us. Thank our guest, Mr. Rahkim Sabree. This is his latest piece, How I Fired My Boss, Escaping Corporate Trauma. It's an ebook coming soon. And remember, if you want to get in contact with myself or Mr. Robert Felder, CEO of FelderWorks, and me, founder and primary success coach of Carbonado Coaching, we provide services and conversation. And if you just need somebody to holler at to walk you through some of these crazy scenarios, please hit us up. We enjoyed this, and we'll be right back at it next week, Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern. Rob, you got the last word.
It's yours. And when I say it's yours, it's your responsibility to control your career. It's your responsibility to find a way to put your family first, or whatever you consider to be the sun of your universe. And if that's the most high, if that's your mama, whatever the case may be, whatever is supposed to be at the center, then you create balance from there. You guys are going to do great, and I hope that y'all share this, because even if certain things go over your heads today, it might catch you or someone else tomorrow. So I'm looking forward, and I know I speak for Jamal as well. We're looking forward to growing with you. So be great. It's your time.
And shout out to my man, guest coming up soon, Mr. Kenji Godfrey. He's on the chat.
Nice.
CEO of Yellow Brick Road Enterprises, because he's going to talk about that other half of the corporate trauma conversation, which is getting your money right. You heard Rahkim tonight. You got to have some of that FU money. Forget you.
I need some of that FU money.
Right, you gotta have some of that forget you money. All right. So
I need some of that FU money, man. Listen, tell him to bring some stacks with him when he come, man.
Oh,
just send it over. Send it over. You know.
All right, later.
Later.